Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We have a fabulous webinar planned for you. I know you'll enjoy. My name's Anita Thompson, and I am the North American Sales Executive for Matific Math. And then about our speaker today, so happy that Rose Palmer could join us as our main presenter. Rose is a pre-K 5 district math coach for the School District of Waukesha in Southeastern Wisconsin. As a math coach, she has had the opportunity to work with hundreds of teachers in providing professional development around numerous topics, as well as writing math curricula for the elementary grades K through 5. It is her excitement and passion for students' understanding and loving math that always guides her work. Before becoming a math coach, Rose was a classroom teacher for over 20 years in 3 different districts and taught grades 1, 3, 5, 6, and 6. So she has an appreciation for all the grade levels and the work that teachers do each and every day. Thank you so much for joining us, Rose. Looking forward to your presentation. I'll turn it over to you and catch up with you at the back end for the Q&A and a little commercial break on Matific. Thanks so much. Enjoy. Lean in and enjoy. Rose has a great presentation planned for you.
Thanks, Anita. So the topic today is on math journal can help students become deep thinkers and active learners. And I think this is important as we get started today to talk through writing and where does writing come into play. So to get to know everyone who's here, so I know how to address different concerns that might be with the group, I'd really like to do a quick poll to get started, just to know where you're coming from. So if you could look at this poll, where are you at? Are you a primary teacher, meaning pre-K2, intermediate teacher, middle school, administrator, or if it's an other, just put it into the chat and let me know what grade level or where you are at for grades so that I can make sure I address those issues or those grade levels as we move forward. Excellent. Thank you. I'm seeing lots of people putting into chat. So it looks like we have several of the primary teachers, which is pre-K to 2nd grade. About 38% of you are fit that. 26% are those intermediate teachers. We have some middle school teachers with us today, a few administrators, not too many, and then some others, which might be high school or they might be pre-K. I've seen some pre-algebra, so excellent. Thank you so much. It's just great always to know who's present, and so I can plan accordingly. Along with that, let's also do one other quick poll. Thank you so much for participating. And the second poll is just, what's your experience with math journals? Have you used math journals in writing, or you've experimented with it, or like never heard of it, or I haven't really done too much writing in math at all? Just to help me to, again, get to know where I might need to go into depth a little bit more than to skip it all around. So great. Many of you have experimented with it, or some of you have never heard of it. So good. We'll get into that. Those of you who've used it extensively, when we get to Q&A, if you have anything to add in, by all means, please feel free to type into chat some things that you have done or things that you've heard along the way along with that. So excellent. So again, about 56% of the people have experimented with it, 39% have never heard of it, and 5% have used it extensively. So I think we're in a good spot as we move forward. So I think some of those things might be a little bit new to you. I'll make sure I go a little bit slower with it. So let me move forward. So for our time today, there are 3 main areas that I'm hoping to cover. One is to deepen your understanding around the purpose of writing in math and why that's so important. And I'm going to specifically talk about ways you could do that with the math journal. We'll look at building knowledge around different components you could include in your writing or your math journal. And finally, we'll talk about ways to organize it. And I will focus on, because we had some of those primary teachers, like what does that look like for our youngest learners? I have some samples of that, as well as some samples for older grade levels too. So with that, let's get started. You have know who I am. You know, I'm Rose Palmer, the coach here in the School District of Waukesha. Have taught many grade levels over the years, have gone in as a math coach to all the grade levels. So the things that I'm going to talk about today are things that we do within our district, as well as things that I've done when I've gone in to teach in classrooms. So it's things that we've tried. It's not just this theoretical, oh, you should, but that we've tried it and we've done it here in the School District of Waukesha. So why is writing so important? Well, here's a quote that Amy has in her book, Math in Plain English Literacy Strategies. And it says, writing causes learning. By writing, we create, transform, mobilize, integrate, and secure what might otherwise be fragile knowledge. Writing whips learning into shape. And when you think about writing, writing is what helps us to solidify that thinking, helps us to know, okay, if I can write about it, I probably know it a little bit better, or I have another modality to focus on. I may hear things, but some people learn more when they write it down, or they might think about it a little bit differently when they have to model it and show that thinking. And so I think writing is important for that reason. And you can also get to different types of writing when you are looking at a math journal. You might have kids write to explore, to make sense of a task. I might have them do some informative writing to describe or explain how did you come about that answer. Argumentative writing is one of the math practice standards, you know, to justify your thinking. And so I can give kids prompts such as, you know, Susie says this, but Jose says this. Who's correct? Or are they both correct? And how do you know? How could you confirm this? So they can get into that argumentative. We can also do some creative writing with math in the sense of how do kids approach problems? They might approach problems very differently, and we want them to be able to show that flexibility or their elaboration of their thinking. Finally, writing can be used to reflect on our own thinking, that metacognitive piece that's so important. I can think about how did I go about solving it? What did I do when I struggled to solve a problem? And I think this is all important because then I'm thinking about math. I'm understanding math. I'm really digging deep. And that means it's not just a procedure I'm learning, but I'm understanding what math is. And that we know is so important to that conceptual understanding or that foundation in math. So our math journals, we wrote this as for why do we do it? That students writing in those math journals is a critical part of our math workshop. We do a math workshop where there's an introduction or a numeracy routine. There's a mini lesson. Then there's application time, and that's where students are doing different math problems. They're doing math. This is where they can write in their math journals. And then the teacher is doing small guided groups. And then we have a reflection at the end. And so we find that math journals fit into this math workshop because it gives our students a way to communicate so we know what they're thinking. It cultivates the student independence by allowing them to share their voice and use it as a reference so they can go back to their math journal and check it out. And if I don't remember to do how to do something, I have it in that math journal so I don't have to go ask the teacher. It also gives them a possibility to refine their thinking and to affirm their thinking. It's always fun to see kids at the end of the year going, look at what I did at the beginning of the year and look and see where I am now, how I've changed or how I've changed in my strategies. And finally, it serves as a way to provide feedback for students and teachers. So our teachers will take their journals home at times and just write a quick note back to a student like, wow, you really spent a lot of time solving this problem. I can see that you know how I could really follow your steps. And so those are some of the reasons we have it as a math journal here in the School District of Waukesha. Another way to look at why writing in math is it can be used as an assessment tool. It gets a window into their understanding, into their misconceptions, or their ideas or feelings about math. So we find that it really provides a great formative assessment as to how students are thinking. We also find that writing in math allows for that discussion and discourse. So students can express themselves. We have kids in our classroom who probably aren't the ones who are going to raise their hand and talk out loud, but they will be great at writing information down. And this is another way for them to have that discourse. We can have them share their notebook with another student, and another student can provide some reflective feedback like, oh, I never thought of it that way. And so they're having a discussion in a way that's with a writing that they may not be comfortable to do to talk or to talk to the whole class. So it again gets into that discussion and discourse piece. Math journals also looks at the quality and clarifying and reflecting on their thinking. So students have multiple opportunities to reflect and to clarify their thoughts. They can go back and re-clarify. And it provides them that opportunity to show their thinking, not just in words, but in pictures. When we talk about those primary kids, they don't have a lot of writing to draw from, but they can write pictures. They can show their thinking with their drawings, their labels, and so they can even clarify and reflect those thoughts that they have around math. And finally, all of us know that students with their organization, our math journals help to keep kids organized in their thoughts and also to keep their information together. I know many a times when I first started teaching, I had those desks where paper was just coming out of it all over. And you'd ask them to find something and they didn't know where it was. And so they were definitely not being able to use a notebook as a reference because they didn't have it organized. And for the math journals, it gives students a way to organize so that they can go back to their thinking, they can go back to the different sections, and it can help them with future math lessons along the way. So those are some of our reasons why we really focused on writing in math and helping our kids to be able to communicate through their writing. So just some background on the why, because I know a lot of times I want to know, why is this important? Why should I do it? Now I want to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about those possible tabs or sections in a math journal. And again, why are they important? Why did we include these sections in? Now, this is our math journal. Your math journal might include something different, or your math notebook. We call them math journals. Our literacy people keep them and they call them thoughtful logs. So we wanted to kind of follow through what our literacy and reading teachers were doing, or our literacy teachers, or what kids were used to, and applied it to the math. So our journal tabs really coincide with our literacy tabs. So there are 4 sections that we include. One of them is in problem solving, vocabulary, strategies, and then my thinking. As we go into this next section, I'm going to go through each section, show you some examples of kid work, because again, it's easy to say, but how does it look from a kid's perspective? And if you're new to or experimenting with math writing, you might say, okay, I'm just going to do one section of this as I start off for this coming school year, or in the middle of your year, depending upon where you're coming from. Or I might want to go and try 2 sections, or I've tried this, but now here are some new ideas or why this might be important. So let's dig into, first of all, problem solving. And you'll notice that I always have a quote from a student on the first part of the page, because we ask kids, like, what do you think about this? Because teachers may think one thing, students may come up with some other ideas. But this kiddo said, I like to solve problems that have more than one answer because I'd like to be challenged. So in our problem solving, we have problems that reflect a high level of cognitive demand. that allow for multiple solutions, entry points, and strategies. So we want to give kids problems where they have to really think, they have to reason, they have to make some guesses maybe at times, or try different ways, or talk to a peer so that they can show that thinking. In our problem solving section, we also provide opportunities for exploring and solving authentic and relevant problems. We give them real world problems, so they have to construct new mathematical understanding. There was a webinar or a video I watched just today that was talking about unfinished learning, because with all this pandemic, there's a lot out there on unfinished learning. And the thought was that the unfinished learning, we've always had unfinished learning. And the doctor was talking about, what does unfinished or finished learning mean? We're never really finished learning. And so really unfinished learning is learning where we don't understand. So this can help our kids to understand and to reflect on what they're thinking. And finally, problem solving in this section, we also have some cognitively guided instructions, CGI problems, as well as open-ended math tests. So we give kids different types of problem solving so that they can see themselves as those mathematicians, because that's what we want our kiddos to be able to do and see. So within problem solving, here are a couple of examples. And you can see that we have on the first slide, there are the first one to the left. There is a problem that says there were 25 spiders crawling across the tombstone. 5 more spiders jumped onto the tombstone. How many spiders were there on the tombstone then? And these are some of the problems that teachers may come up with or give kiddos when they are, in winter time or fall time with spiders. And so you can see in this case that the student did write an equation. She has a part whole diagram there, as well as some of the base 10 pieces. And the student said, I solved it by a picture. So again, not looking at spelling, not looking at full sentences per se, but looking at, do they know how to solve the problem? At the other one, this was actually one of our kindergarten students, and you can see the date of October 13th, and it says, at Grandma's house, there were 10 legs. Who might they belong to? So an example of an open-ended problem. So all kids could start, they could draw pictures, and they could write in the numbers. Many of our kiddos didn't label cat and mouse, so this was a kindergarten that had some of those things there, as well as they might have asked a teacher or an educational aide as to how to spell those words. But many kids could draw stick figure people. Here's Grandma, and they'd write 1, 2 for the legs, and Grandpa, if Grandpa was in the house, and put their legs on, and a dog. But they came up with ways to do their 10 legs. And it's now a great conversation starter for another student to talk to a partner and say, this is how I came up with my 10 legs. What did you do? So that there's more than one answer, and they can learn from each other or talk through it. Here's another type of problem solving, and this one is, I have 6 cats. Some are brown and some are brown. How can you finish the story with pictures, numbers, or words? So again, with the Common Core standard attached, because in this one, the teachers wanted to know what the specific standard was. And so they put those into their math journals. And you can see these math journals. If I go back one, we have them in notebooks. And a lot of times the teachers will have a section that the kids can just paste it in. And so the teacher makes multiple copies, maybe cuts them, and has the kiddo put it into their journal, and then they can put their answer underneath. In this one, this teacher also wanted the standard there. And then on the next page, the student actually drew their cats. And so you can see again that in this case, she has that 3 were brown and 3 were black. And again, drawing their pictures so you can see exactly what they're thinking. So again, it can be used at an early age. I know, again, many times we think kindergarten or those early kiddos are not able to write things, but they can draw pictures. They can represent their thinking. Or this one, Max had 10 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He gave away 4. And this is a student where he had to write his own problems. So that's where it's transcribed. He had written it out and then he solved it. So we have kiddos come up with their own math problems to solve. And they might share those. We might use those then for other students. So they see themselves as writers and being able to come up with those math problems as well. If you have Matific, Dreambox, or any of those technology ones, again, you can have kids, you can give the kids problems, or if you have a platform that they're using, have them select one of those problems and put it into their math journal and show what strategies they use to solve it. So it's not always having to be teacher created. It could be one that you have from your math textbook or your math curriculum that they could put into the math journal. It's now just putting it into the math journal every now and then so they have a sample to go back to versus just one that gets sent home, if it's a worksheet type of idea. The next section of our math journal is called vocabulary. And we felt vocabulary was important because of all the key vocabulary and the words that are important to do math. And this gives them that opportunity to interact with the words to make meaning. The kiddos here said, my vocabulary page helps me if I forget something. I can look it up. And we really stress the math journal as a resource or a reference. If you're not sure about a word, look it up. You have it there. We also have word walls in the classrooms, but their journal is their own personal one. So if they want to take it home, they have that math vocabulary with them. They can see what they wrote for the word or how they described it. We use a variety of frameworks. So we may have them do a Freyer model or a Marzano 6 steps to develop their understanding of mathematical language. So if you have a way within your district as to how you deal with vocabulary words, you can use that right away within your math workbook or your math journal. So it's not a new strategy or it's not something new for your students. It's just a continuation. That literacy is going to continue over into your mathematics or numeracy block. Finally, in our vocabulary section, teachers can provide scaffolds for language structures for students to express mathematical thinking. So we may give them some help to be able to answer or to know the vocabulary. So some examples of that might be, again, this first one is more in that kindergarten section where it was greater than and less than. And so they talked about it and they had kiddos, and this might be a first grade actually, where they had to draw pictures. Give me a picture that shows greater than some number. Give me a picture that shows less than. So they wanted the greater to be the bigger number, the less than to be the smaller number. So in some way, the kiddo was interacting with the words so that they knew what it meant in their own thinking. The one down here is the Freyer model. So you can see here, the word was rounding. We have them put a definition in this section. This one is one that a kiddo said, rounding is where if you have a number higher than 5, you go to the closest number. And if you had 4 or below, keep what it's in. Now, some of us might say, well, that's not the most technical definition, and we'd want to continue to develop that, but that's how the kiddo is thinking through it. It gives me that light into their thinking. This is what they heard when we presented. We know we can present things to our students, but they may not hear, or they do not hear what we thought they heard. This is that window into it. On the next side, over here, we have them give some characteristics. So this student put 4 and below, let it go. 5 and above, give it a shove. Now, some people, again, conceptual understanding might be, oh, that's a saying. Does it really develop meaning? So we might know that either A, in a previous class, there was a saying that was done, or I just need to know that's what the kiddo's thinking about. But then down here where it gives examples, this student did make a number line and did show 450 and 460. So now it shows that the student understands some benchmark numbers, and they made 452 really close to 450. So they circled the 450. So that's an example that shows me that the student understands a little bit more than just give it a shove or pull it back or whatever that characteristic is. And then some teachers will have them do a non-example. And so they show how, they were thinking about it in a non-example way. For some kiddos, that might not be the easiest to do. So you could put a different characteristic or a different idea into that section. Here's one where the vocabulary word definition is spelled correctly, and then each student draws a picture to represent their learning and understanding. So they may be copying the definition from a screen up front, and then the teacher asked them to show a picture. So it was addition, and the student wrote put together, but then they had to show something. So the student wrote 5 squares, and you can see 2 triangles, and so the student said 7 shapes. And the teacher can look at this and say, does the student understand what addition means? Were they able to put together ideas? So some of our teachers, especially as you move into the older grades, will have the students copy instead of giving them a slip to paste in. They will copy the definition or write the definition, or they'll use that Frayer model where they come up with their own definition. I'm hoping you start to see that there isn't just necessarily one way that we do it. We change it up depending upon the grade level or depending upon the vocabulary words that we're using. So here's one where this teacher may have created an anchor chart, and you can see the names of the 2D shapes and the attributes and the examples. There's a lot of vocabulary within geometry. So you can see the names of the shapes. You can see the sides and the vertices. You can see the examples. So again, it's helping to reinforce what does each word mean. And as the students are working, they can come back and they can review. So if they get a sheet or an activity that they need to do the next day, or if it's a month down the road because you're reviewing and you're going back and they're like, I don't remember. Now they can go back to this section of the math journal and look it up. Instead of just saying, I don't know, I'm going to give up, we can say, how do you help yourself? How do you become that independent, active learner that we want you to be? And they feel empowered to be able to do that. Another strategy of our math journals is a strategy section. And the student here says, I can look in my math journal for a strategy to help me solve a problem. Many times kids will get problems and they're like, I don't know what to do. I'm not sure. So you can look to your strategies and see, what have I done in the past? We might do that, counting on, or maybe we had them draw pictures. Maybe we said one of the strategies is to simplify the problem. So they can go back to those strategies and try one of them. So by the strategy section, it allows students to deepen their understanding of math concepts. It gives them a way to interact with co-constructed anchor charts to develop and refine their thinking. So if I give them an anchor chart about a strategy, they get to try it out right away. It's not me just telling them, but they're making meaning of it. And finally, students can include those key strategies as a reference, and it can help them to clarify their thinking. So if I'm looking at strategy examples, here are some where, I'm going to blow this up and see, I don't know if that helps you on your screen, but I can see the partial products. They were talking about multiplication strategies. So they were showing multiplication with the with the partial products, the kiddo wrote down what it was and then did an example. Now, maybe they did the writing together in class, but each student did their own example. When I'm first starting out at the beginning of the year, we might go and have them actually do the example and the words together. As we go forward into the year, I eventually might have them do their own example instead of us working through it together. You can see over here, they talked through the distributive property. Down here, they talked through the area model. So all of this are ways that you are being able to see how the strategies are there. And so when kids get another multiplication problem, they can come back to their math journal and say, okay, we've done this before. What are some of those strategies? What can I try? Which one did I, understand and do the best with? Here you can see an earlier grade level where they were looking at using 10 frames and number bonds and showing different ways that they could add numbers together. They could draw a picture. So they had a picture here. They could use 10 frames. They could write an equation. They could use a number bond. So again, a variety of strategies that kiddos can use and can put into their math journals so they can come back to them. When I look at these strategies, there's a split strategy and a jump strategy. This was an anchor chart that teachers put up in their room. And from here, students now can put that into their journals. They could take a picture of it to put it in. But then down below, you could see that they tried that by using a number line. They used that split or they did a jump. And you can see how they're thinking through it. So again, just as a review, this section is about giving students ways to try to do problems, different strategies that they learn, and then they can come back and reference it. They can come back and look at it, and then they can try that strategy when they get another problem down the road that might be similar or a little bit different, and they have a place to start. It's just a nice way for them to be able to be a little bit more of an independent learner, to empower them to think through their understanding, and to be able to try some different strategies if they're not sure of where to start. The final section that we're going to talk about is my thinking. And what I mean by my thinking is a synthesis of the vocabulary, strategies, and problem solving. It's where we're going to put everything together. It provides that opportunity for students to think about their thinking. In other words, what do I know about this? What do I know about this strategy? How did I use it when I problem solved? Or what was that vocabulary word? And they can put it all together when solving a math task. It allows for a reflection of their students' learning. So thinking about what are qualities of a good problem-solving partner? It's not that we're giving them an answer, but what do you think? What makes a good problem-solving partner? And if I'm thinking about what makes a good problem-solving partner, now I might think about how can I be a good problem-solving partner? Or we've done all these strategies. Which one's most efficient for you? Or if you look back at your problem-solving section, which strategy do you usually use? Can I expand my ideas of strategies? And so it allows students to reflect, to think, to process some of those ideas of where they're at and really becoming that independent learner. Finally, it includes students' reflections on those math standards. Like, is there a way to connect between your money that we've studied this year, the time, and the fractions? That's at Math Practice 8, being able to generalize across different strands of math. Like, what's similar between money, time, and fractions? And if you give kids time to think, they will start to realize that Oh, wait, money, we had quarters. Time, we had quarter to or quarter after. Oh, how are those related? And fractions. Oh, we have a 1/4 and a 2/4. That's the same as a clock with a quarter of. And so you're getting them to see some of those connections. And so the my thinking section, again, a student's quote was, it lets me look back at how I have grown and what I thought about my learning at the beginning and at the end. Sometimes we have kids do my thinking of, I used to think, but now I know. And so they can see again that growth. That's empowering for students. So here you can see some examples. My thinking, what did I get better at today? And so this was a question that the teacher wanted the students to think about. And it says, I learned a lot about finding decimals, and I learned a lot on counting up on a number line more. And so it says, my partner helped me on the number line. I know that my brain grew today because I can do it now, and it is easier now for me. I think the packet today helped me. So this is where the student is realizing, like, if I work with a partner or if I talk to someone, I can get it. Here's another one, like, how would our lives be different if we didn't use math? So the my thinking questions are different types of questions, but they go deeper. It's not just about solving a problem, but it's digging into those math practices maybe, or reflecting on what it means to be a mathematician. Here are some other examples I included here that we have. We've written some of these for our teachers so they have some samples so they don't always have to create all of their own. We give some of those for our teachers in the district. But thinking about, what does division mean? Fred says that division is about dividing a number into equal groups. But Jane says it's about how many items are in each group. Who's correct? And we'll have kids write about that in the My Thinking section. Like, what do they know about division? And then there's that critiquing of understanding, the math practice, which it says evaluate, the reasonableness of answers, or evaluating and justifying. The one down at the bottom is that Polina and Shelley both used paper clips to measure the length of the same table, but they came up with different answers. Why could have that happened? So it's not about getting an answer to a problem, but thinking. It's that reasoning. We want critical thinkers. We want kids who can reason through. And the My Thinking section can do that. Again, you can tie it into a digital program if you have, or a textbook, if you have that for your curriculum, and just pick out a problem. And so this one is, again, a problem from Matific where I can give an assignment. So I might have given all kids this assignment because we're talking about decimals at the 5th grade level. And so it might say, after completing the assignment in Matific, turn to the My Thinking section of your math journal. Explain the process you followed to determine the pattern and how high to make each of the bars. So where did you start from? Where did you think? How did you think about it? So they've been working through this, doing an assignment. Now, what did you take away from it? What can you synthesize? What can you put together that might help you when you get other questions like that or as a problem? So those are the 4 sections. So again, we have a problem-solving section where they're actually solving problems. We have a strategy section, vocabulary section, and the My Thinking. So all of those are the sections. So you might say, well, then if those are sections, how do you organize them? How does that happen? How do you, that sounds really confusing for our students, which, valid question by all means. So we have different journal formats, and it really depends on grade levels, and it depends on our teachers. We let teachers decide this. So some of our teachers will keep it in a regular composition notebook, and you'll see they have tabs off to the side, and they will have, this teacher does it by the strands. And so if I look at this first book, and I pull in, they have mathematics and I'm trying to think what the first one was, but this is in operations. This one was data. They might have fractions. So they have it divided up by the strands that you might be using in your grade level. Some people keep them by number tabs. So they have number tabs 1, 2, 3, 4. So those are the 4 sections. And then they color code the strands in it. So if I'm asking them a question or the strategy is something about counting and cardinality, I'm always going to put it on pink paper so that they know that if I'm looking for something about counting, I'm going to look in pink. Or if I'm looking for something about measurement and data, it's going to be in yellow. So some of our teachers will color code the different sections. Other teachers, our kindergarten teachers in one of the buildings I've been in, they will have problem solving strategies, vocabulary, and my thinking. And each of those, they don't go into the strands, but they color code each of these and they put it in a binder. So the students will do a vocabulary word or activity that greater than, less than, and then it will be on pink, and pink is always going to be their problem solving. So when they go to their binder, they know that page goes into the problem solving. And I've had teachers even go, and this is the 1 is colored pink, the 2 is colored yellow, so the kids can color match where it goes. And again, it's just a way to help them to organize it. So when I go back and say, we want to review what kind of strategies have we learned so far? Let's go to tab 2 or go to your pink tab or your yellow tab, and let's look at the different strategies we've talked about so far. And so you can review, you can reference it, and the kids get accustomed to going back and checking on it. Some of our teachers do it digitally, especially with the pandemic and some of the virtual learning. So I'm going to show you 2 different ways you could do it digitally, depending upon what resources you have. So one of the apps that we have is called Notability. So they do their whole math journal in Notability. And so it allows them the structure. So you can see here's their math thoughtful log. And then they have the my strategies, my thinking, problem solving, and they have it all listed there. And then when I go to a section, like I'm on my strategy, here are all of their different strategies, and they have them listed. This teacher lists the strategies as I can statements. And so it says, I can explain, recognize, and generate equivalent fractions. And then when I go to that page, that's going to be the header. And then underneath, they will talk through strategies that they've learned about generating equivalent fractions. So you can see that you can put it into a digital format and it works really well. My teachers who have primary K1 sometimes like the digital format because then kids can talk into it. We don't have K1 where writing is a challenge, or even for some of our special needs students, everybody else is doing paper pencil, but some might do parts digitally so that they can speak what they're thinking versus having to draw a picture. So those are some easy ways to modify. I've had teachers, instead of doing all 4 sections in one notebook, they'll do 2 sections in one notebook and 2 sections in another so that the kids can keep things separate. All of our teachers have the 4 sections, but again, they're thinking about their grade level. What's the best way to organize it? Other teachers will use Google Slides. And so I'm just going to kind of go through this teacher's Google Slides. And so she makes a copy and the students make a copy of it. And she has the table of contents. So again, she adds a section into hers called I can statements. And then she has vocabulary, strategies, problem solving, and my thinking. And you can see that she's added on to a little bit more into it. And she says, all my thinking sections are purple. She has colors for each section. So for example, if I go adding and subtracting fractions, here are your I cans. So that's in the I can section. Her vocabulary is blue. You can see where she gives the kiddos on the Google slide the vocabulary word and a definition. The kiddos need to fill in the example in the model. And depending upon what they're doing, they might be able to draw it or they might just type it in so that those are there within that Google slide. For strategies, she has strategy section all in yellow. So they know that it's going to be a yellow section that they're going to. So here is strategy 1 in finding the least common multiple to find the least common denominator. And so they can take pictures of anchor charts and then they can write in their ideas. The digital part is nice because you can have pictures and kids can take pictures, and at the older grade levels, they know how to insert them into Google Drive or into their Google Slides. Here's another one. And so sometimes she asks them questions to respond to and to do something about it. So it's not just about being a scrapbook. We don't want it to become a place where kids are just, gluing things in and they never do anything with it, because then it's a glorified scrapbook. They're not going to see value in it. They're not really going deeper into their thinking. And so that's why we usually have them interact in some way with the math. Finally, her problem solving is more of this pink color. So she'll give them problems and they have to explain their thinking using pictures or a model. Can you solve it another way? And so those are those type of things. Or she has open-ended questions that are a little bit more in depth that they can think through real life. And then finally, my reflection. When will I use fractions in real life? Or why is it this way? Explain. So just using digital slides might be another way to do a math journal instead of paper pencil. Here's another one. Now I know, I would like to get better at. So just some ways to organize that math journal, because it can be overwhelming. Again, if I'm one of those who's experimented with it, but I just want to start it out, I might only do one section. This year, we're only going to keep a math journal, and in it, we're only going to keep track of vocabulary words, or we're only going to keep track of strategies, or whatever section it might be. Or you might have a new section. I know some of our teachers have wanted to do, can I just do unit 1 and then put all the stuff in, and unit 2 and put all the stuff in? And we have found as we've done that, sometimes kids don't reference back because unit 1 doesn't have a meaning. What is in unit 1? I don't know. And so that's where that math journal becomes a scrapbook again versus a useful tool to help kids to think about what they're learning and what they're doing. So just a few final thoughts as we finish up. Some general considerations. Calculations, or having them do multiple problems, should be in a different location or a notebook. You'll notice that in my math journal, there was never a time where I gave the kids 10, 15 problems to do to practice adding or subtracting. Yes, we want kids to practice. Yes, they're going to do some of those calculations, but do that in a different notebook. Because if you go back to just finding calculations, it's not going to mean a lot for students. It just is that, calculations. And so we keep that in a separate notebook. We want the math journal to be a resource for them, where they're really doing some thinking. Hear what I just said. It's that resource. It's a reference. It's not scratch paper for you to, jot down some ideas. Because we do a math workshop, it can happen at any time. We sometimes do math journals right away as an opener, a numeracy routine. Maybe today my numeracy routine or my opener is going to be about a vocabulary word. So we're really going to talk about this vocabulary word. I might put it into my mini lesson, because in my mini lesson, I might be teaching a strategy today on how to add or subtract or multiply, divide, something with fractions. So it might be part of my mini lesson. And so while I'm talking and teaching, we might be putting notes into our math journal. It might be part of the application time. because at the application time, while I work with small guided groups, students might be in their math journal doing a problem solving activity that we want to capture. So it can happen at any point, or it could be a reflection at the end. As you saw in one of the questions, what went well today? What did you learn today? What was something new? We do like them to date each entry so they can see that growth over time. It's not a requirement, but we like that. Kids like it when they can go back. Problem solving and journal prompts should be included within math journals. Sometimes we used to just give them a problem solving and not have a slip to put in or have them write it. But then you'd read the question and you didn't know what was happening. What were they doing? What were they answering? So we usually try to include the problem solving task or the journal prompt. So that's why we have those little squares that can easily be glued in, and then they can write. Or if it's digital, we can already have it part of the slide and they can start with their work, because then kids are not wasting and spending their whole math time just writing out along the way. Determine which ways you will ensure students will reference information from the logs to solve problems. So if you don't reference back to those logs, guess what? Kids won't either. So that's why at one point I said, today let's go back to this section of our math journals and let's see what we've learned about this word before, or what strategy have we used before, so that we can use it to research, to reference when we're solving problems. How are you going to do it? Are you going to do it handwritten or digital? What's that way you're going to access it? And finally, thinking about feedback and workflow. If you're never going to look at their math journals, kids won't put time and energy into it. So you need to have a workflow system, whether it's I'm going to look at them, I'm going to take 2 or 3 notebooks home a night to look at, and I'm going to give quick comments, or I'm going to do look at it, 2 or 3 each night, or I'm going to take the digital ones home and I'm going to look at them all over the weekend. However it works for you. You have to decide what works best. But I can tell you, kids love it when teachers make comments on it. It pushes their thinking. If you ask a question, they're just wanting to know you're looking at it. So could it go on for much more time, but I just want you to know, feel free to reach out to me. That is my email address. You can see my link on Twitter there to ask questions, and we'll take some time and do a couple of questions now as well. So I'm going to turn it back to Anita.